What is the ethics of that? Are there any givens in that kind of relationship?
One has to be aware of the total web of which one's a part, and issues like the sustainability of the web and the danger of the networks themselves breaking down are things that one has to consider as problems.
So there's more responsiveness here, but maybe part of the criticism is what guarantees do we have? And I know that we don't have any guarantees of anything, but that this is going to be better than the trunks. This is better for difference.
Yes.
This is because difference is recognized as natural and inherent in everything, and necessary. Yeah. But at the same time, because morality then and ethics become contingent as well, it can be appropriated by market forces, for example, and become something else. So is there any safeguard in this way of thinking that we can use as a response to criticisms in relation to that?
The market needs an ultimate trunk in the form of the guaranteeing of value. Things can only exist in market relations to the extent that they're reduced to equivalential value, that everything has an exchange value, that basically comes back to a trunk. But there aren't really guarantees at stage 7 that any particular outcome is or isn't going to happen. But there are certain things that can be said to be better at 7 than say at 1 or 2, and this would be experience should be more intense. It should be easier to form connections and to reform connections, so it should be harder for energies, attachments and so on to become trapped like a fly in a bottle. It should be a lot easier for forces to get out of whatever traps they get into.
For flows?
Yes.
To flow?
Yes. It should also, you've already mentioned it's obviously liberating for difference. So each of us, to the extent that we're all different from the kind of definition of the benchmark person, those parts of us that are repressed by that kind of dominant model are better able to find expression at 7 than at 1 or 2. And I think it also helps in dealing with social relations and in dealing with ecological relations. It's helpful as a way of thinking for things like conflict resolution, for things like social group formation, and for addressing problems that often come down to difficulties in the relational complex of a particular ecological system. It makes it easier to think ecological systems, to think groupings of relations.
So to think unity and oneness in that sense. Yes. So the idea that you become aware of your situatedness isn't, instead of, from the trunk perspective, situatedness would separate you from the trunk and isolate you. Actually, situatedness in stage 7 make you aware that if everybody's situated, everybody's a rhizome, everybody's a node, we're actually one, we're part of the same web. And whatever we do has effects on others. And maybe that awareness of oneness is what prevents you from destroying the web.
Yes.
Because you're destroying yourself. But then what is the will then not to destroy yourself if you're a node in a web? Where does the will of life comes from then? What do you think? I don't know, I'm deviating. And I'm not going to use that in that.
Okay.
Why wouldn't you destroy the web? That's the fear here.
Yeah. I think the question would more be, to turn that upside down, why would something that's a node in a web want to destroy the web? Why would it want to destroy itself? If we look at motivations for self-destructiveness in the world that exists, these usually come in fact from either trunkist positions or from nihilisms that are reactions against the trunk. In general, things that are structured actively, things that are structured in rhizomes, don't seek to destroy themselves. But if they did, in a network context, in a web of nodes, with any luck, the network would hold, even if certain nodes had self-destructive tendencies. The network would have a certain strength.
Self-regulating.
Yeah. I think what you get with the trunks, looking at trunks from a network perspective, the action that happens on the basis of trunks often seems very clumsy, one-sided, often sledgehammer-like, and often sort of you've got a very limited set of tools that you use for everything. And violent in the sense of applying the same approach to everything without regard for whether it fits or not. And cutting swathes through reality, destroying a lot of things without necessarily even perceiving what's being destroyed or what's being threatened. So acting on the basis of a trunk can be something that leads to, because of the rigidity in action that it leads to, that can have very destructive effects without there having to be any malicious intent behind it. It can just be a matter of applying an overly rigid schema to everything. Whereas I think with awareness of nodes comes awareness of complexities, subtleties, situatedness, relatedness, that allows more cautious action, which allows greater awareness of what it is one is acting in relation to.
And more responsiveness.
Yeah, more responsiveness to the context, and more responsiveness to, I think as well, greater ability to process reasons, greater ability to conceptualize reasons for failure, and greater ability to modify courses of action which have been unsuccessful.
More powerful learning, better capacity to learn from any situation in any context with anyone.
Yes.
So would we be able to call this? It's a process of maybe developing response ability.
Yes.
The ability to respond to different contexts, to contingency, to complexity.
Yes, I think we could also call it learning how to learn.
Yeah.
It's almost without going through this process, one has a limited capacity to learn. The trunk places a limit on the capacity to learn.
Limado has been talking about the Through Other Eyes as a methodology of dissensus rather than consensus. So maybe what's coming to my mind is that dissensus is up to the nihilist stage, isn't it? And it's a necessary pedagogical process to get people to that stage. But after the dissensus, because for some people, like, they look at dissensus, they say that's anarchy, that's nihilism and everything, but there's something else. There's something else that comes out of that, which is engagement and responsiveness and accountability. Yeah.
What we then have, I think, is difference arranged non-antagonistically. So it's kind of consensus of dissensus almost.
Consensus of dissensus is nice.
It's a holism of a whole which is itself different and diverse, which is not reducible to sameness, which doesn't have a trunk. So it remains dissensual in that sense. None of the nodes are reducible to any of the others or to a transcendent element. But it isn't necessarily conflictual. It's that difference kind of used affirmatively, used productively.
One is indifference, isn't it?
Yeah.
What is the Zapatista thing for that? They have a slogan. I can't remember now, but...
A world where all worlds fit.
Exactly, a world where all worlds fit.
That's exactly it. That's what 7 is. That's what the final stage is a world where all worlds fit.